With the football season right around the corner, there's plenty of players on this roster that can make an impact, but who will truly break out in 2025? Let's talk about it right here on Locked On Kansas State.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. Got a great episode for you tonight because we are going to dive into some of the breakout players of this roster of 2025. We're going to dive deeper into the depth chart of 2025 as well so far in week 0, because there's some true freshmen on there that we need to talk about and so much more. And of course, we're going to get some bold predictions on this show. I said that's because Joe Tillery joins me on this episode. Let's get to it right now. Before we do so, this episode's brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, let's get to it. Joe Tillery and myself talking about the Cats. Joe Tillery joining the show right here on Locked On Kansas State, and you know it's always going to be a good time. We're talking football. We are days away from Dublin, Ireland, Kansas State, Iowa State to begin the college football season. And Joe, I'm sure you're as excited as I am, probably more excited. I'm ready to run through a wall, though.
Yeah, man, it almost feels like illegal that it's happening this fast. Like, this is insane to think about it. I've been fired up all offseason. I'm just pumped that we're through the point of like the grind of making offseason videos into, okay, we're 72 hours from football. At the time of watching this, probably closer to 48, but like it's right there. This is Christmas morning in a nutshell. I'm fired up for it.
Yeah, man. And check out Joe Tillery stuff on YouTube at Joe Tillery. You can talk talk about the Cats all the time. Well, I should have put that at the beginning of this conversation here. But yeah, we are so pumped. It's hard to put all my thoughts together, Joe, because I'm so excited about this conversation. I want to get to your thoughts in Dublin. I want to get to some conversations on the depth chart as well. But I feel like we haven't had a conversation in a little bit of time because, just getting ready to this entire offseason. I wanted to save it. I wanted to get ready for this week in Dublin. And I have to get your opinion on who do you believe are going to be some breakout players. We talked at the beginning of fall camp, right at the end of spring camp, really, right before fall camp started. We kind of got a taste of what you felt about the team in the spring. But now we had a full fall camp. We've had unfortunately, some injury concerns. We've had some changes to our initial thought process. But now we are days away from Kansas State making hopefully a Big 12 title run for the first time since 2022. If that is going to happen, Joe, if that is going to make the statement, if we're going to get back to Arlington, who are going to be some of the breakout players? I'm not talking Avery Johnson. I'm not talking about some of these players that everybody likes to talk about, but who do you think can be some breakout players for the team this year?
Well, let me start with offense, because this one even almost falls at, we've blown this guy to proportion to the point where it's almost Avery Johnson territory, but every single offseason, it seems like there's a wide receiver darling. There just is. You can pick who it is every single year by the start of the roster, and then you get to the end of the season, you say, well, that was dumb, that was miscalculated, that was over the top. I know people want me to pump the brakes till it happens. I know people want this to be sat on for a little bit, say, you know what, let's see what happens when push comes to shove. We don't know who's going to be out there and actually making plays. You've seen that with Keegan Johnson. You've seen it with Trey Spivey. You've seen it with 100 different dudes in this roster. I'm here to tell you right now, Jaron Tibbs is legit. Like everything I've heard, and this is probably like, we all know how much hype was given towards Keegan Johnson last season, and even the year before that, to put that out there. We all know how much he was the most talked about guy. He was the best looking player at practice. He was this, he was that, he was this. It never manifested on game days. One, injuries played a factor in that. And then when he was healthy, he just didn't have enough time on the field to ever really click with the quarterbacks, whether that was Will Howard or Avery. That situation persisted all the time, it felt like. Jaron Tibbs is a guy that I am so fired up about. I have heard from countless sources from people inside the program and elsewhere that have faced him at Purdue, here, whatever the process is, that this kid is a serious problem in the wide receiver core. And that's a beautiful thing because you already have Jace Brown. You have a guy that's going to be a bona fide top 5 receiver in the Big 12 conference, maybe top 7 in a down year. Jace Brown's up there. The fact of the matter is, I don't think Jaron Tibbs is that far off of that type of praise. Like a top 10 receiver in the Big 12, I am not against putting that out there on film right now or on tape. I'm really, really fired up for the kid. He's a big-bodied, fast, physical, high-point catcher. The guy can do anything you want of him. He's young, but he's got some experience, and he's gone up against some superstar defenses. I know Purdue's garbage. Everybody knows Purdue garbage. My brothers go there, went to college there. I give them trash about it all the time. They face some good defense. You see the Ohio States of the world. You see Penn States. You see some really good teams. He still gave them some troubles. I mean, there's a clip. There's last year against Nebraska. The kid was truly bracketable. Like, you had to shade him at all times. And that's for an offense that's absolutely horrible. Hudson Card at quarterback. Sorry, Hudson Card, if you're somehow catching the crossfire here, that's my bad. But the dude is a legit playmaker, and I cannot wait to see what he does in this offense. And oh yeah, let's not even mention Jaron Bradley. Like, that's a guy that can also blow up and have some explosions. But at least in offense, that's the guy I'm going to be watching for in Arlington. I don't think there's a number they can set in terms of over/under yards that I wouldn't want to take at the moment. He's going to be that good. Now, defense.
Wait.
Oh, sorry.
Let me get on this real quick before I get your
Yeah.
defensive thoughts, because again, I'm ready to run through a wall too.
Absolutely.
The wide receiver conversation is just so interesting to me on both sides of the ball here, Kansas State and Iowa State in this game, to be completely honest. But for breakout season, for the full thing, you mentioned Keegan Johnson of last year, and of course there was a lot of hype. There's definitely no doubt about that. But this one just feels different. Tibbs feels different. The hype about him this year, and I do feel I agree with you 100%. Joe, and I wonder, do you think that this narrative finally, after this season, about bringing in transfer wide receivers and them not panning out, do you think that we can finally put that narrative to rest?
Yes and no, because I think that narrative attaches itself to people with massive expectations. And we just talked about expectations. I know everybody has a lot for Jaron Tibbs, but in terms of overall recruiting or portal numbers, he wouldn't be an elite player in terms of transfer portal numbers. I think there's still a knock in the minds of some fans. Even if this kid goes for 1,000 yards, that's still there as like, okay, it's almost like we lucked into this one rather than we found one. And I think sometimes that narrative can be looked at that way. I would love to leave that behind, but K-State has gotten into these conversations with, KC Concepcion. They've gotten in with conversations like the kids that went from Georgia Tech. I forget his name off the top of my head, but there's a couple of elite receivers that were openly flirting with K-State and vice versa. You didn't get the job done. You made it to the final two. It didn't work out. That narrative is still going to be there in the recruiting aspect, but if Jaron Tibbs comes out there and balls out, nobody cares. Like, you found your guy, you made it happen. I don't know that the narrative's ever going to be gone until you truly are like adding multiple receivers year in, year out that are going to have positive impact, because that's really been a low point under Chris Kleiman's teams as the receiver core. But I truly think it goes a long way to saying, all right, we don't need to land the best guy in the portal class every single year when you find guys like this year in and year out. So I think there's a little element of both there.
Yeah, I mean, if he sniffs close to 1,000 yards receiving, I think you're right. I think it doesn't matter. Look, I have been stressing this entire offseason that Chris Kleiman and his recruiting staff find better fit. The stars don't matter. When it's the recruiting class, the transfer portal, they have done such a good job with finding the right fit. So if Tibbs becomes one of those guys that is not the biggest name in the portal, but finds a way to get 800, 900 yards, becomes the top wide receiver 2, or maybe even sniffs wide receiver 1, maybe even competes with Jace as the top guy, I don't think anybody's going to matter. You're right. Okay, give me your defensive guy. Who's your breakout guy for the 2025 season?
So defense, there's 100 different dudes you could mention. I feel like there's more questions on defense outside of maybe the linebacker room.
Fair.
There's more questions on defense than there has been in the past, just because there's uncertainty of positions. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Questions can still have good answers. I'm not going to try and sit here and say, well, we don't know what's going to happen with this position group, so that means it's bad. You could always outseed expectations. The guy that I think has slowly been coming on lately, a guy that had a ton of hype in the offseason transfer portal, I think Qua Moss is a guy you're going to see show up time and time again. Now, when you look at that position, the field safety, you've had Marques Sigle, you've had Josh Hayes, you've had a ton of different guys come through and just be high-impact guys always around the football. I think you found another one in that. And I won't sit here and try to say he's going to be better than VJ Payne at his position. I'm not playing the comparative game because I think VJ is going to be an all Big 12 safety this season. But Qua Moss is the guy that truly will be that Josh Hayes type of always around the football. Doesn't matter if it's thrown across the field, if it's boundary side, if it's this, whatever's happening, he's going to be near the football at all times and making plays in the run game. Like, you saw some of the film, you saw some of the tape when he committed. The dude can definitely get his nose in there and, he can throw some bodies around. I'm not worried about that. But I do think Qua Moss is in for one of those big type of seasons where it's, okay, this kid continues to show up. And then by game 5, game 6, you're saying, all right, we got a game plan for this. We got to think about how to go around this kid in terms of other offenses looking at Kansas State.
Obviously, one of the biggest conversations this offseason is talking about how to fill the holes in the secondary after losing Jacob Parrish and Marques Sigle, and they went heavy in the transfer portal. Qua Moss being one of those guys, of course, still waiting on the hopeful return of Gunnar Maldonado, who is not in the depth chart this for week 0, but Moss being that top guy for the safety position to match with other players like VJ Payne. Sigle at moments seemed like to be the guy, the leader of the defensive secondary last year. At least it felt like that way in some forms, especially when he made some really exciting plays, exciting interceptions. I'm not trying to make you compare him to VJ Payne because I think Payne is going to be that leader as like that returning veteran. But if you try to put him in the shoes of taking over for Sigle, do you see him having the opportunities to make those big time plays as well?
I do in a certain sense. I think that's a great way you put it. I see him in the situation where Marques Sigle found himself in positions to make plays. That first year, he was a solid player, but he wasn't necessarily making the plays, though he was in position. The second year, you saw him make the plays. You saw him get picks. You saw him all around the field. The pick six against West Virginia comes to mind, and a couple other key moments. Marques Sigle was always in position to make the plays, and it was on him to make the plays. I think Qua Moss is a guy like that. Now, I don't know about his leadership or how he is, and I truly do think, like you mentioned, VJ Payne's that guy. I also do think this might be a conversation for week 2, week 3, whatever the process is. Gunnar Maldonado, to me, is the quarterback of that defense. He gets everyone where they need to be. He's going to be your alpha dog leader alongside of VJ Payne, alongside Austin Romaine, who I think is going to be a top 50 pick in the next draft. But I truly think he is the quarterback of the defense, for lack of a better term. Qua Moss feels like a guy where it's like Kobe Savage, where it's the idea of, obviously that may not have aged well looking back at it, but a dude that's going to be physically always around the football. Doesn't matter if it's a run, if it's a pass, if it's a screen. He's going to make exciting electric plays, and you can mark him on the depth chart immediately as that guy that's going to be around the football. I think it's definitely a possibility that he steps into that Marques Sigle role and thrives.
Austin Romaine is a top 50 NFL draft pick. I couldn't get that in my head. I thought I was going bold with top 75. I'll take top 50. That's great. Hey, I want to talk. Yeah, good. I think I'm going to join you in that narrative for sure. Hey, I want to talk more secondary coming up on the next segment, and then we can maybe shift back to offense a little bit, but mainly that secondary side, because the depth chart came out for the first time this season, and there was a couple true freshmen on there, some that we have not talked about enough. Let's do that next on this episode of Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401, your properties, or investments. And when you don't have that full picture, you can't end. You can't feel good. You're going to leave money on the table. That's where there's Monarch Money. It is an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. I'm telling you, it is so easy. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data, visuals, get smart categories of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money, even without touching a single spreadsheet. I love Monarch Money. I have used it to make sure that I found out that I'm spending too much money on takeout delivery, all these little small, simple things that you don't think about on a day-by-day basis. You get that help with Monarch Money. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks and get financial freedom at your fingertips with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com or in your browser for half off your first year. That is for 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. This episode of Locked On Kansas State is also brought to you by OpenPhone. OpenPhone, if you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If that person didn't answer, you just moved on. You didn't wait. And that's why you need OpenPhone. So you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. The best part with this new world of AI, trying to get ahead, it's all about adapting or dying, folks. Well, the AI agent handles after-hour calls, it answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss the customer again and you're not standing by the phone 24/7. So see why over 60,000 businessmen trust OpenPhone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnCollege. That's PHONE.com/LockedOnCollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. What a feature. It's worth it. Check it out. Open phone. No missed calls. No missed customers. There are some young guys stepping up right off the bat, and it's not because they're playing an FCS school. It's not because they get warm-up games, but we're getting some true freshmen on the depth chart sometime for the first time since, 2023, that we're actually seeing some of this noise, and it's going to happen against Iowa State, Farmageddon, a Big 12 foe in Dublin, Ireland. Joe Tillery joining me on Locked On Kansas State. You can find his stuff at Joe Tillery on Cats in one of the most unique and awesome ways possible. So make sure you check that out. But Joe, I got to ask you about this depth chart. There's some surprising pieces, of course, in here, and we can get to those in just a minute. But the main focus I want to talk about, because I don't think we've talked about him at all on this show, and we need to, because there's been some hype over the fall camp and spring camp. Logan Bartley shows up as one of the Jack safeties. He's not the starter, but there's an or sign next to it. So it's either Wesley Fair or Logan Bartley as the starting Jack. Naples, Florida kid, a true freshman. Interesting stuff. Where's the hype behind him? Why aren't we talking about him enough?
Well, that's a great point. And I think you phrased that perfectly. To see a true freshman on these depth charts, whether it's Logan Bartley, whether it's Lincoln Cure, whether it's any of these guys, we start to think about it and say, like, imagine it last year. You're playing an FCS team out the gates. You understand, okay, like, we're going to see how he fits in. Maybe this is just more like a, hey, he's done well in the offseason. Let's get him out there to see how he does. Scrap all that. We're playing a top 25 team rivalry week out of the gates in a different country, and these kids are borderline starters. In the case of Logan Bartley, like, he's right on that cusp with the or. You're a starter by association, I guess the best way to say it. The kid has gotten to camp, he's gotten through it, and has gripped the playbook. He's done everything possible. He's gained weight. He's a physical specimen. If you see any of the photos on Instagram, like, the kid is built like 15 pounds since he got there, looks shredded, looks lean, looks fast, looks physical. He was kind of in that same lane where 2 Big 12 media days ago, I remember talking to Will Howard and talking to some of those guys about, hey, who's a guy we're not talking about enough? Who's a true freshman on this team that could step forward and make impact? And just about everybody solidified Austin Roman. Like, didn't matter if you were going offensive defense. One of those guys would say, hey, Austin Roman's going to be a guy to watch for us. He's going to be a really good player. Logan Bartley has followed that same timeline where it's like, hey, watch out for this kid. Now, obviously, Austin Roman didn't see the football field till an injury happened, free up some space. This kid, Logan Bartley, can truly start for this football team and anchor a really, really, really good defense. It's physicality. It's his recognition of the playbook. I remember Joe Klanderman saying something along the lines of, like, we haven't seen a true freshman kid get what we do here at Kansas State this fast ever. Like, this is unprecedented. And he's not entering college as a 5-star guy. He's not your top prospect. He's not, he's kind of a middle of the pack guy, which kind of preaches Kansas State football accurately. You think about all the legends that came through in that same spot, but Logan Bartley is fast, physical, he's smart, he's intelligent, he's got great instincts. I think you're going to see that kid play a lot of football, even with Gunnar Maldonado coming back, even with some of these guys rotating in. He's going to be a mainstay because the coaches have been taken back completely with the kid.
Let me just play devil's advocate for just a small second here, because I don't truly believe this, but I just want to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that the secondary position of, the safeties, the corners of Kansas State this year are kind of unproven, right? All other than VJ Payne coming back and being the only really returning player with some type of performance, if you take out the Rate Bowl game, right? Other than the breakout plays of Zayton Rich and Donovan McIntosh, with the exception of those guys, there wasn't really much returning production. So do you think seeing a true freshman on this depth chart in week 0 against Iowa State has anything to do with that? Or do you think this should truly be a nod to Bartley and all he's done since he's got to Manhattan?
I think there's some truth to both of those things. And taking it back, like you said it really, really well there. When you look at camp, there wasn't a ton of proven guys. Obviously, there's some big names. VJ Payne's played a ton of football. Gunnar Maldonado's played a bunch of football, even though he's banged up. And the two cornerbacks that are returning this year played a ton in the Rate Bowl. Looked good. You knew they'd have a big role. I think the way this staff looked at the secondary this offseason, nothing's promised ever with this team, and I respect that, because you don't want to just have a guy, hey, I came from this school, hey, I did this previously. You got to get to Kansas State and show us what you can do. What happens here that I really, really like is that they looked at the drawing board at a clean slate and said, okay, we've got VJ. That's the only guy we know is really going to be back there consistently. And then they based it entirely off of who has been the best this summer, who is going to give us the best possibility to win. And that's where I tip my cap to Logan Bartley, because you are showing out over guys that are sophomores, that are juniors, that have experience elsewhere, and you're showing why you deserve to be on the field as a true freshman. So part 1A is respect to him, and part 2 is just like some of the unpredictability is going to be there because you don't know who's going to do what. But I like where they're at least in terms of, hey, we got to survey what we had before we try to say, okay, this could be this person, this could be this spot. I think Logan Bartley earned that spot, and then he also truly just like showed like why he deserves to be out there and just scrap the freshman thing. Like, don't even worry about where he came from, when he got here. This is a football player, and he's going to impact winning in positive ways. I think that's why you see him on that depth chart.
Well, let's not scrap the freshman thing, at least for this conversation, quite yet, because I want to go to the offensive side real fast and, of course, talk about the most exciting prospect, most exciting recruit that Kansas State has had in quite some time, and that's, of course, Lincoln Cure. He finds himself on the tight end depth chart, but he finds himself as either tight end 5 or tight end 6, whatever way you want to look at it on this depth chart here. He is behind all 4 of the returning players that had returning production that helped this team lead the country in red zone touchdowns with 13. But I do think we're still going to see a lot of things from Lincoln Cure. The way that Chris Kleiman talked about him, unlike any other true freshmen, when you talk about him in press conferences at media days, of course, he's a Kansas kid, and they're going to find a way to talk about the top recruit the way they can, but it sounds different. And just like I mentioned early in the first segment, talked about how Tibbs feels different compared to the Keegan Johnson hype, the Lincoln Cure, the conversation seems just different as well. What kind of season do you think Lincoln Cure is going to have? Are we going to see a decent amount of him? And are we going to see it early in Dublin?
No, I don't think you're going to see it early. I will say this. I think you're going to see a lot of Lincoln Cure, but I don't think it'll be right out of the gates. Now, he did have an injury through camp and had some stuff to play catch up on a little bit here and there with the playbook. But overall, like when you hear guys talk about him as teammates, like Avery Johnson talked about him and said, hey, this kid's going to be a problem for the entire Big 12 once he gets up to speed. And the biggest conversation about him was getting his weight up. The kid's weighing 240, 245. He looks the part right now, but getting up to speed as a true freshman, whether you're a 5-star or a walk-on, that is still a massive task. And for the grace of Kansas State, the good thing here is that you have 4 or 5 guys that all caught touchdowns last season and had positive winning impact on football there in Manhattan. So you don't have to rush them out there to be the main guy and say, Lincoln, you got to be ready by week 1. Lincoln, you got to be ready by week 2. I think you're able to afford him that grace. Now, that said, that's not me talking him off the edge saying, hey, this kid's got to be, a backup to the backups. He's going to have impact. He's going to have abilities. There's going to be size, there's going to be size necessary where you need to toss him out there and go make a play. But I think they're going to work him in at different points. They're not just going to throw him out on the island by himself the first play of the season, but I think you're going to see him in some 2 tight end sets where he might be kind of a jumbo receiver like we talked about a while back. But you've got the grace of having a guy like Garrett Oakley, having some of these guys. Will Ancio's had a great summer. Braden Lofton. There's a ton of different dudes that have made plays for Kansas State. I think he can kind of lean on those guys in addition to him rather than looking at Lincoln Cure as like, here is him, here's the rest of the receiver group, or here's the rest of the tight end group. I think he's going to be in tandem with some of those guys, but you will definitely see a Lincoln Cure signature moment or two during this season where it's like, okay, that kid is going to be special once he puts it all together.
Last question before we head up to the next segment, and I get your predictions on this Dublin game, talking about this depth chart. Of course, the offensive line pops up with the fact of George Fitzpatrick not being available, not going to be your starting left tackle the way that we thought was going to happen after he was spoken so highly of at media days by Coach Chris Kleiman. John Pastore takes over the left tackle position, but what's interesting, though, is what I saw on the right side of the offensive line. J.B. Nelson or Andrew Leingang as the right guard. I thought potentially Leingang might pop out and be the right tackle, but no. Pitt transfer Terrence Enos takes that job, and there's no or there. It sounds like he's won that one straight out. So the right guard position seems like it's going to be loaded between Nelson, a former all honorable mention Big Ten player in the past when he was with Penn State, and then Andrew Leingang, who has shown some great progress in the past and what he's done for Kansas State as well in seasons prior. What's your overall feeling? I'll ask that. Your overall feeling with the offensive line against the Cyclones to start the season?
Well, it's a challenge. I won't lie to you about that. Iowa State's got a good D-line. They're healthy. That's kind of been their knock lately is the linebackers have been banged up or their D-line's been banged up. They're healthy. They're all the way there. It's going to be a challenge. But I have so much faith in Brian LePack. I think he's one of the smartest men in college football, really one of the smartest dudes out there. But former lawyer turned football coach, great decision there, works out great. But I think the O-line's got a lot of promise. And when you see Laney, a guy like Andrew Leingang, he offers you positional versatility where he can be left guard, left tackle, right tackle. Like that kid can truly jump out whenever you need something. I think this year you're going to see more than the guys we saw last year play. You might have seen 7 or 8 guys last season. You might see closer to 9 or 10 this season because there's going to be guys trying to find the best position group out there. And I don't think Brian LePac's going to play favorites. I mean, that's not the type of guy he is. He wants the best production. Now, I won't sugarcoat it. I truly do think George Fitzpatrick has been the best offensive lineman for Kansas State. I think that kid has an NFL future. We'll see what lies ahead with his health situation. It's kind of still up in the air, it sounds like. But I would expect him, whenever he does hit the field, whether it's down the road or recently or in the near future, I think that kid's going to have serious impact and be an NFL draft type guy immediately. Now that said, they feel confident in John Pastore. They feel good in Terrence Enos. And I was less concerned about John Pastore because I truly do think he's a talented player, 6'6", 320. He's going to be a dang good guy to step in there. But with Terrence Enos and JB Nelson, you're getting there in the spring. So my question was going to be, how do these guys step up when it gets to that point of, are you going to grasp the playbook? Are you going to grasp the concepts? How do you feel about that? I'm not worried about it. I think JB Nelson was on one of the best offensive lines in college football last season.
Agreed.
Terrence Enos is just a big physical specimen. That dude's going to be talented, and I'm excited to see him. If they're out there, I trust Brian LePac, but I still do need to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I am so excited for this game. I cannot wait, and I hope this offensive line gives us everything that needs to be, because this offense could be super exciting. And I want to hear your predictions about the game in Dublin and then just overall thoughts about the Kansas State team, because it's a tough schedule ahead. The more I look at it, the more tough it looks, and I want to get your thoughts on that. We'll do that next to wrap up this show right here on Locked On Kansas State. This episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Postseason is already heating up. We're days away from Dublin starting the college football season, and football isn't far behind, of course. Whether you've got your eye on a big-name quarterback or breakout running backs, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in the game. If you are excited about something, the weekly flower for this weekend, PrizePicks is offering a max discount, and this max discount comes right into play with Kansas State. Max discount number one is Avery Johnson of over a half pass yard. So if you think Avery Johnson is going to complete a pass over a yard, you can check that out for an easy max discount. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you can use Avery Johnson in this one as well to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, run your game. This episode's also brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th, a couple days after week 0, is officially FanDuel's Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who love bold predictions like myself and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you the deals for NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling for an MVP in August or you're eyeing a long shot division winner ready to crown your Super Bowl winner, or the Super Bowl champ, I should say, in week 1, well, get ready. You can do that. This is your moment. I'm going with an MVP race here. I think that we can get a crazy MVP winner here. How about like a rookie? What about a Big 12 guy? Could Travis Hunter go from Heisman Trophy to MVP? Like, could that happen? I don't know, but that sounds like a pretty bold thing, and you could check that out in FanDuel's Future Day. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. We are so close to this game. I mean, as of right now, we're speaking. I'm pretty sure that the team is flying over to Dublin. If I remember correctly, it said Wednesday night they're going to fly over and they're going to get ready to get going. And this is going to be such a good game. Iowa State, Kansas State to start off the college football season. We get a Big 12 matchup. Yes, it sucks that it's not in Manhattan, but it's good for the Big 12 brand. I'm really hoping Brett Yormark gets back in his ways and says, hey, we need to make sure this game is protected past 2027. I hope this one's a slobber knocker. I really do. I've been going around and saying this one's a coin flip. I think this one's going to be a really close game. For the most part, it's usually within one score when you look at some of the past Farmageddons, especially recently. Joe, what is your overall take of this game? Like, how is your vibes feeling? What are you feeling right now heading into Dublin? Of course, with all this stuff going on, Avery Johnson starting to get a little bit of hype, and you look at some of the national media starting to talk a little bit more about the second-year starter for Kansas State. But we know what he is, and we've seen what he has done, hitting the 23-mile-an-hour club, all that stuff this year. What's your vibes heading into Dublin?
Well, you caught me at the right moment because I think this last month I've been kind of a roller coaster where I'm like, it's going to be a really close game. Hey, we're going to take care of this. It's going to be, going back and forth all over. I feel like I'm at a point now where I'm more confident than I have been in the past week or so. Not to say we're going to blow Iowa State out. I don't think that's the truth by any means. I think Iowa State's a good football team. They truly do not get blown out. Matt Campbell will any team, whether they're a winless team or they're an undefeated team, they will be competitive in most games. But I do think it's a massive test for them to replace those receivers. Now, game 5, game 6, I wouldn't want to play Iowa State. Game 1, I feel a little bit better where it's still up in the air to say, all right, hey, both teams, we're all trying to figure this out. Who can figure it out faster? I have a little bit more faith in Chris Clement to get that job done out of the gates. But I do understand it's still going to be a tough game. You're still going to need to make plays. I have Kansas State winning by more than a score. I'll put that out there now. I do still think it'll be relatively low scoring. I don't know if it's the best way to say it. It probably still barely clips the over, but I'm not sure what it does off the top of my head. But I've got Kansas State winning this game 33, Iowa State 24.
Our friends at FanDuel have the over-under right now, I think at 49.5 or 50. So we would just get the over.
Just barely
on that
get over.
prediction. Yeah, that'd be over, but that'd be a good one. I think it's going to be the over as well. I do think it's going to be around that score prediction. I'm saving my exact score till Friday, so I'm sorry to give that to you. But
that works.
Spoiler alert, I think Kansas State's going to win the football game. But the score prediction I'm saving for Friday. Look, when you look at this offense, when you look at what we've heard from the coaches and press conferences and interviews this entire offseason, I know you're glued just like I am on those conversations. Coach Brian Anderson, the running back coach, has said this is the deepest running back room he's ever had. We talk about how Matt Wells is going to have the offense to himself and what he excels in the past. What we've seen with Jordan Love at Utah State, excels in the play action. Can Avery Johnson get the most out of that with his dual threatness? These wide receivers with the size that they're bringing in to Avery Johnson, can that help him succeed and be better off in his completion percentage, something that people outside of the Kansas State nation like to pick on, with Avery Johnson saying he's not the guy because of that one number for some odd reason. What is your take on this offense? Do you think it's the best weapons that Avery Johnson has had, if you obviously compare it to last year? And is it enough to get back to Arlington for the first time since 2022?
I 100% agree. I do think it's going to be enough. I think it's more than enough, to be honest, which is a good thing because there's uncertainty, there's injuries, everything happens. Some of that stuff happens every single year. The way I feel about it this way, Avery Johnson doesn't have to be a superhuman with the team and the pieces he has around him. Last season, I think Avery had to do a little bit too much at times to go win football games. And that's a pressure, that's a conscious thing on yourself. We're at the point in the offseason where I'll say this. I almost feel like Dylan Edwards has been so good. Now he's almost undervalued. Like, people are just at a certain point where, like, Dylan Edwards is going to have impact. He's going to show up. I don't know if we're giving him the actual, like, hey, this kid truly is a home run threat every single time he touches the football. Like, it doesn't matter if it's kickoff, if he's returning kicks, returning punts, if it's a draw up the gut, if it's a screen pass. 70 yards isn't that far for Dylan Edwards, about 50 yards for Dylan Edwards. But the thing I love to see about this offense is it feels like Matt Wells understands, like, you got to get Avery on the run for the best version of Avery Johnson. When he's mobile outside the pocket, give him the option to make the choice of, do I want to run this? Do I want to throw this? When you have guys that are going to get open downfield, when you have Avery Johnson making decisions, I feel very, very good about where this team's at. And I do think it's enough to get back to Arlington and maybe even hit that college football playoff goal.
Does this game in Dublin, does it run through, like, does the Big 12 championship run through Dublin? If this game happens, if Iowa State finds a way to win this one, is the season over for Kansas State?
I don't think it is. I know some people will say that it is. I don't think it is. I'll leave it at that. I think there's an opportunity to get back, but you will see a lot of grit and determination. Might not be the first 2 weeks of the non-con after the game, but that first week of Big 12 season, like, when you start to get to some of those dogs during the conference schedule, you'll see Kansas State's trying to make that effort.
Hopefully we don't have to worry about that, and hopefully it's a
Sure.
Wildcat win in Dublin, Ireland this Saturday, 11 o'clock Central Time. If you're still watching at home, lots of stuff happening. So excited for this. Joe, I am so glad that you joined me on this conversation. We got to get you back on here soon, hopefully when we're 1-0 on the season. Joe, where can everyone find you and your work, of course, at Joe Tillery?
Well, I'm over on YouTube at Joe Tillery. The other way around on Twitter, it's at Tillery_Joe. Working for Heartland College Sports. If you see me over there, come say hi, come check out some stories. But just trying to get through one day at a time. Now it feels a lot closer than it did a couple months ago, and I'm fired up about that.
I can't wait. And of course, we want some more Kansas State men's basketball talk too. Joe Tillery always has you covered on that side. Thanks so much for listening, folks. We'll be back here again. We got a heavy lineup all the way up until game day, and of course, all the way through that right here on Locked On Kansas State. So be sure to like the video, be sure to subscribe. And this has been Locked On Kansas State.